Hey, this is Enaa, in with you in the fight back. Today, before I do some Israel-Palestine stuff in the coming weeks, I wanted to tackle probably one of the more frequently asked questions on this conflict that comes up, and it is essentially this. Isn't Israel the only democratic state in the Middle East? Well, let's ignore the Arab revolutions in the last few months, and let's just look at Israel itself. And let's see what we have. They do have a Declaration of Independence. They have many laws that supposedly protect equal rights, that supposedly do not discriminate on the basis of race and religion. Palestinian or Arab citizens of Israel, they have access to the media. They're able to vote, and they're even able to hold office. All of this looks really good, and Israeli spokespeople will point to it. But to do that, you kind of have to ignore the really big elephant in the room, as it were, and that is the occupation of the West Bank and Gaza, which has been going on since 1967 and the war. And what does this entail? What does a colonial occupation entail in this case? Well, you got people on the street with guns. You have the fact that Palestinians, perhaps to get from one town to the next, which may be only a few minutes away, you have to suffer at a checkpoint where you're dehumanized and are treated like crap. You have the fact that if the Palestinians in the occupied territories elect a government, that government is not necessarily respected by the Israelis, who may boycott it and urge other states to do so, as happened when the Palestinians elected Hamas several years ago. You have the fact that the Israelis have settled in various portions of the West Bank and Gaza, and these settlements are often hotbeds of extremism, and the fact that the Israeli settlers may have access to water that the Palestinians do not have. They have access to roads that Palestinians do not have. And a colonial occupation, make no mistake about it, is a form of violence of the highest order. To maintain a colonial occupation, you need guns and soldiers, and of course generally accompanying a colonial occupation is the whole ideology and practice of racism. Now, even within Israel proper, behind the 1967 lines, you have the fact that Palestinians are often discriminated against when it comes to jobs. I don't believe they are actually able to own land through the Jewish National Fund. And you have the fact that Palestinians are discriminated against because the very basis of Israel is that it is a Jewish and democratic state. So if you're not Jewish, well, you're kind of seen as the outsider, the other. And the idea of, well, Israel can be a Jewish and democratic state, sure, and the U.S. can be a white and democratic state too. Just excludes, blacks, Latinos, and the indigenous. So the thing about democracy is, meaningful democracy includes everybody. Black, white, everybody. If you're suddenly going to just say democracy is just for Jews, or that we're a Jewish and democratic state, you're automatically making a certain group the other, the outsider. And that's what Israel does. And other states have done it in their time as well. Now, you'll have supporters of Israel say, well, you're singling out Israel for criticism. Look at the human rights abuses in Egypt and Saudi Arabia. Oftentimes you would have people, say 50 years ago, when someone would criticize the U.S. South or the U.S. policy in Vietnam, and some defender of U.S. policy, well, look what the Soviet Union is doing, or look what China is doing. Well, that's just deflecting the issue. That's just bringing something else in there. And the truth is, many of the surrounding Arab states have horrendous human rights abuses as well. But you're just deflecting the issue by talking about that instead of about the failings and abuses of so-called Israeli democracy by focusing on the abuses of another state. If you're talking about that issue, focus on that issue. Another time, another place, you can talk about abuses in Egypt, Syria, or wherever. But if you're talking about the failings of Israeli democracy or the fact that it's a colonial occupation state, well, you're you should focus on that and not something else. So that is pretty much that basic introduction. And this is Enaa. Until next time.